Just letting them in, get themselves comfortable. Good afternoon to those who have just joined now. We will be setting off promptly at 2 o'clock, but we'll just wait a moment or so before people, just to allow a couple more in. We tend to get people who join either just at 2 o'clock or maybe a minute or two afterwards. So it's very nice to see you all. I think we've got 22 people booked on. We are recording the session, so if there's anything that you missed, then you will be able to catch up on that as well. Welcoming those people who just joined us. We will be starting this session promptly at 2 o'clock, but we'll just allow a few more to join us because we've got a few people booked on. Obviously, there's a lot of changes going on, and we know this is something of a priority for people at the moment. And we're delighted to be running this session as well. Okay, so I will start the session. So thank you all very much for joining us today. We are absolutely delighted to have Andy Stanney from Nectar HR. They are our corporate partner. I'm not sure if you are aware, but Nectar HR do actually provide an hour's worth of free HR advice using their support line, and I'm going to put that link into the chat as well. And what I absolutely love about Nectar HR is the fact that they are really good to talk to, and they talk clearly and concisely and are able to give you some really good sound advice. So I'm Sue Jones, Director of Social Care, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce and hand over to Andy Stanney at Nectar HR. So welcome, Andy, to us.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And no pressure at all for me to speak clearly and concisely through the duration of this webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining for this session on updates to employment law. I am just going to indulge myself very, very briefly and explain a little bit about who I am. So I am the senior consultant at Nectar HR. So I report directly to Sonia, who is the director and founder of Nectar. Yeah, I'm qualified to level 7 with CIPD and have over 30 years experience in human resources, principally in the Royal Air Force. So I joined the RAF straight from school and spent 30 years there, doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things, mostly HR, branched a little bit into project management, a few other weird things that only happen in a military context, before finally deciding to leave and get a proper job 3 years ago. 3 years ago last month, in fact. My first job out of the Air Force was as head of people at a hospice. Did that for 2 years before deciding to take a bit of a leap into the unknown and branch out into consultancy, joining Nectar 11 months ago, so just about a year. Very much a generalist, so a jack of all trades, master of some, and by virtue of what we do in human resources, we have to keep very much abreast of current and future planned changes to employment law. So yeah, I would definitely consider myself a specialist in this area. Nectar HR was founded by Sonia initially in 2011 as a bit of a side hustle. She was working as an in-house HR manager in a primary care organisation and wanted to set up her own business. So started doing consultancy in addition to her full-time paid role. And then as Nectar grew, she took a step back from her paid work and launched Nectar properly. Took a bit of a pause in 2014 to deal with some stuff going on in her personal life, and really got Nectar going again properly in 2018. Of course, since then we've had Brexit uncertainty, we've had global pandemic, we've had all sorts of things come along, and yet Nectar has continued to develop and grow through all of that, and is in a really strong and rapidly growing position right now. As I said, Sonia's background was in in-house HR with primary care. I spent 2 years in working with end-of-life care, and other consultants within the team also have experience of working within the care sector or the health and social care sector. So what that really means is we understand what the CQC is looking for when they come and do their assessments. So we are quite experienced and gifted at providing policies and ways of working and dealing with issues in a way that when the CQC come knocking, they will be very more than satisfied with what they see from what we provide you with. Cover the whole range of the employee life cycle, from recruitment, selection, onboarding, looking at your whole HR setup, your policies, your processes, and so on, dealing with disciplinary matters, grievances, sickness absence management, and to be you name it. If it comes under the HR umbrella, then we can do it. And right at the bottom there, training. So something that we've very much been a growth area with Nectar over the past 12 months is not just writing the policies and writing the processes and doing that with you, but then training line managers and staff in how to employ those policies. The whole point being that what we end up with is a really positive workplace culture where everybody knows where they fit within the team. They know why they're doing what they're doing, and any and all issues that come up can be resolved in a constructive way that leads to the right outcome. We do have a national reach. Again, this is one of the upsides, I think, of COVID. I think before the pandemic, the idea of having an HR support that is not in the same building as you, never mind one that is possibly in a completely different part of the country, was quite anathema to people. And COVID has taught everybody that actually these things can be dealt with virtually, exactly as we're doing today. So we do have reach all across the country. And we work with you. So we're not one of those consultancies who will just pull a ready-made policy off the shelf and say, here you go, this is your policy on spoiler alert neonatal care. We will work with you to understand your organisation, to make sure that the policy that we produce for you works for your organisation. Everyone in the team is CIPD qualified, very experienced. We've got between the 7 of us currently, probably about 150 years of experience in HR. And everything we do is legally compliant and fully insured. Okay, so on to the main topic of the afternoon, employment law. So what's happened over the last 12 months and what do you need to know? As you will know, employment law updates very regularly because things happen, government reacts, they introduce legislation, it works its way through Parliament, then gets enacted, and then the rest of the world has to then adapt to that new legislation. So thinking about over the past 12 months, lots of things have changed. So annual leave for 0 hours and part-year workers, we'll come on to in a bit more detail in a moment. Flexible working rights have been enhanced. Sexual harassment has been a fairly recent implementation. neonatal care, which comes into effect from this weekend, and changes to national minimum wage and statutory rates. You are probably very, very aware that in October, the government introduced the new Employment Rights Bill into Parliament. It's presently working its way through Parliament and will receive its royal assent within the next few months. We are expecting that most of the changes it brings in will take effect from probably April 2026. But it has a long way to go through Parliament yet before we need to talk about implementation dates. If you think about what's changed in the last 12 months, so flexible working. So a year ago today, the law changed on flexible working, which gave employees a day one right to be able to request flexible working. Previously, they had to be in continuous employment for at least 26 weeks before they could make such a request, and they were limited to one request per year. They can now make a request on the very first day they start employment with you, and they can make 2 statutory requests per year. Other main thing for you to realise is that there are now a very, very small number of reasons that you could legitimately refuse a flexible working request. So previously, the onus was on the employee to be able to demonstrate that their flexible working request, whether it was going to be home working, hybrid working, compressed hours, reducing their hours, whatever it might be, they would have to be able to demonstrate to you that the changes they were proposing were not going to adversely impact your business. The boot is now on the other foot, and it is on the onus is on the employer to be able to demonstrate that they have a legitimate reason to refuse a flexible working request because of, for example, the impact it might have on other members of the team. But that has to be very, very clearly demonstrable that that's the case. Leave for 0 hours and part-year workers. So you may or may not be aware that in 2021 there was a tribunal case, Harper versus Brazel, in which the complainant had claimed that they were being unfairly treated because they worked in a school. They only worked during term time. And so when their rolled up holiday pay was calculated in the normal way, they felt that they were being they were losing out because it wasn't averaged out over the whole year. So the tribunal found in the claimant's favour, and it was changed so that for irregular or part-year workers, then they were able to have their holiday pay calculated on how much they'd worked on average over a whole year. That just became impossible to manage, frankly, and after much lobbying, the law was clarified. And so from April last year, you can again just apply the standard 12.07% to rolled up holiday pay for all your casual workers, even if they're irregular or part-year workers.
Andy, just on
yes.
I think there was a question in the chat, and I think it relates to flexible working.
Yes.
Emily has asked, is it still the 8 reasons to refuse?
8 sounds about right. I can never remember them off pat. I've always got to go and look at our records. But 8 sounds about right. Yeah. It's certainly no more than that.
Okay. Thank you.
And yeah, paternity leave. So prior to last April, fathers had to take either 1 or 2 weeks within the first 15 weeks of the child's birth. And it could only be taken in a single block. They can now take 2 weeks, but in 2 separate blocks, and are able to take that within the first year of the child's birth, or adoption in the case of placement in the case of adoption. What else have we seen in the past year? Again, since April last year, we've had changes to maternity leave, adoption leave, and shared parental leave. So the period of special protection from redundancy has been extended. So people are now protected from redundancy for up to 18 months after the birth of the child and for the duration of the pregnancy. So that can be quite a challenge if you need to do a restructure and you've got a member of staff or a couple of members of staff who happen to be pregnant or on maternity leave at the time that happens, because they are protected from redundancy, which in a small organisation, where people might be in single occupancy posts rather than in a large team, that is quite a challenge. But it is a fact that they have that protection for up to 18 months after the birth of the child. And one that changed more recently, October. So 26th of October last year, there came into force a legal duty for employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. That also includes a legal duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment by third parties. So if, for example, you run a care home and you bring in contractors to do some maintenance work, and a contractor is accused of sexual harassment while they're on site, then you have equal liability for that behaviour as the contractor who has carried out that, or has been alleged to have carried out that behaviour. What is reasonable is a really good question that I'm anticipating somebody might want to ask. We don't yet know. We will find out when somebody brings a case to an employment tribunal and a judge has to make a decision on what they consider to be reasonable. So in terms of the policies, the risk assessments, the action logs that we are helping people put together, we are recommending erring on the side of caution, because until we get to a tribunal, and we don't know when that will be, it's very, very possible there is a case working its way through the system right now that will give us the answer to that in due course. But we don't know yet what the law considers to be reasonable. And an amendment to the Trade Union and Labour Relations Act that has come into force, it allows tribunals to increase compensation by 25% if you are required to engage in collective consultation and fail to do so. Looking a bit more about the sexual harassment. So, as I said, with effect from the 26th of October last year, employers now have a legally mandated duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. And again, tribunals can uplift compensation by up to 25% if they find that the employer has failed in that duty. So some sort of measures that you might be able to implement to take those reasonable steps, making sure that more than one person is deciding on the rota and opportunities for staff, so that one person is not or can't be accused of rigging the rota so that they're always on with somebody with somebody who feels that they might be harassed. Reducing or where we can eliminating lone working opportunity or occurrences. Making sure that staff have more than one trusted person they go to with an issue. So you would like to think that they would be able to go to their line manager, but having a sexual harassment champion who is completely impartial and independent, who you can go to in exactly the same way as you probably have freedom to speak up guardians and whistleblowing champions and so on. Looking at your back office spaces as well as your front of house processes to make sure that they're safe and they're comfortable for staff, and making sure that people have the opportunity to report harassment anonymously. it is well known that people who are victims of sexual harassment are less likely to speak up about it if they cannot do so anonymously. If they have to put their name to it, it's a massive deterrent on bringing these things out into the light. It is a legal requirement now to have a sexual harassment policy, particularly for dealing with third parties, which is something that we wouldn't have needed to think about before, and creating systems to reduce those. So let's take the mythical contractor for an example. If a contractor is accused of having conducted himself in a way that could be deemed to be sexual harassment, then having a means by which they can be prevented from having access to that building or to those members of staff in the future. And make sure your staff are well trained and know what to do if somebody comes to them and says that they have been a victim of sexual harassment. And finally, we strongly recommend having posters around your workplace. So in the same way as I'm sure you have whistleblowing posters and freedom to speak up posters, having posters about what to do in the case of sexual harassment. All these collectively would be, as far as we're concerned, deemed to be reasonable steps. Neonatal care, leave and pay. This is very hot off the press. So this comes into effect from this coming weekend, from the 6th of April. It means that somebody who has a baby who requires neonatal care is entitled to up to 12 weeks of leave in addition to maternity leave, paternity leave, or any other the family leave types that exist. Key things: the employee must have responsibility or shared responsibility for caring for the baby, and the neonatal care must last for a minimum of 7 consecutive days and must start within 28 days of the child's birth. After that point, it's no longer considered to be neonatal. People who are eligible to take this leave include the mother, of course, but also includes the father or the mother's partner or the adopter, the main adopter, or the main adopter's partner. Currently, there is no eligibility for the father's partner, if the father's partner is not the mother, or for grandparents to be able to take neonatal care leave. So that's where things stand at the moment. That may change as people start to use this and it starts to change. Employees will receive 1 week of leave for each 7 consecutive days of neonatal care that the baby receives. The neonatal care leave will need to be taken within 68 weeks of the birth of the child or the placement in the case of adoption. So if, for example, a baby is born on the 12th of April and is admitted to neonatal care for 14 days, the father of the baby will be entitled to their statutory 2 weeks of paternity leave and 2 weeks of neonatal care leave. Statutory neonatal care pay can be paid, but similar to maternity pay, the employee in question has to have 26 weeks of continuous employment and must be earning above the lower earnings limit. So things that you will need to consider is making sure that you have, ideally before this weekend, but if not as soon as after that as you can reasonably manage it, a neonatal care leave and pay policy and the supporting documents. Make sure that your employees know that they have this right, and make sure that your absence systems, however you record your absence, has the capability of recording this leave. If you need to update contract employment because you have the family leave included within your contract of employment, we would always recommend having those as non-contractual because it makes it a lot easier to bring these things in when these things happen. But if your family leave is contractual, then your contract employment will also need to be changed to bring this into effect. I'm sure very aware that April is the day that national minimum wage, or the month of national minimum wage, and other statutory types of pay change. So up on the screen now, these are the new rates. So the changes to the national minimum wage came into effect from today, and the other entitlements, so maternity pay, paternity pay, and so on, they generally come into effect from the 6th of April, from the beginning of the tax year. So again, from this coming weekend. Previously, if your systems were a little bit slow to respond to changes in the national living wage, then that was just one of those things. And it's quite common really for companies to do their pay awards and consider the pay awards and get full sign off and approval sometime into April, maybe into May, in some very rare cases as late as August, and then backdate it all to April. And that's all been known and accepted. With effect from this year, anyone who is not paid the correct rate of the minimum wage in April, that creates a legal liability on the employer, and the employer could be very harshly penalised if you don't pay the new minimum wage rate from this month. So that's things that have happened or are in the midst of happening, things that are coming up that we know about. So we already mentioned the Employment Rights Bill that was introduced by the government in October. Now, rather naively, when it first came in and we looked at what was included, I felt that because of the size of the government's majority, because of the parliamentary arithmetic, that the law as enacted would be virtually unchanged from the bill that was introduced, until a few weeks ago, more than 200 proposed amendments to this bill were introduced. I think lots of MPs have taken the opportunity to listen to their constituents and make recommendations. Unions have definitely been involved in the consultation process, and they've made recommendations for amendments, many of which have been adopted by the government. So, we still don't really know exactly what this Employment Rights Bill is going to look like when it comes into effect. It is making its way through the parliamentary process. It cleared its final passage through the House of Commons just last week, and is now working its way through the House of Lords. So it's presently in the committee stage with the House of Lords, and it'll go from there to the report stage. Then there'll be the consideration of amendments, and then eventually it'll pass and get royal assent, and then we will know exactly what we are needing to play with, and what changes that means for us and for you. There are about 40 different changes that are being proposed. So I'm not going to go through all 40 of those today, because we will be here a very long time. But things like reducing the threshold for union representation to possibly as low as 2%. So if as few as 2% of your workforce want to be represented by a union, and you get a request for recognition from a union body, then you have to consider it, and you have to have very, very good reasons to reject that. And even then, it would likely then go to the Central Arbitration Committee, who would probably find that the union has met the threshold, and that there is no good reason to not recognise the union. And so you will probably find, after this comes into effect, that union involvement within the social care sector will quickly become far greater than it has been historically. So don't want to scare anybody, unions can be quite nice people if you work with them. But it can be tricky people as well, as I'm sure you all know. One of the other things that is going to come in is giving the government the right to bring tribunal proceedings on behalf of workers. So even if your employees, your workers, if they have something they feel aggrieved about, but they don't wish to go through the tribunal process themselves, the government will be able to take that up and fight the case on their behalf. So exactly how that power will work is still yet to be established. It's working its way through Parliament, and it's going to sit with the Fair Work Agency, which has not yet been created. Fair Working Agency, as it says, will also have responsibility for enforcing employees' rights on things like the national minimum wage, statutory sick pay, and so on. Agency workers' rights, dismissal and re-engagement, which is the proper name for what is known as fire and rehire. So fire and rehire is already a difficult thing to do. It will functionally become impossible to go through that through a fire and rehire process once this bill becomes law. Other things that are going to come in is affects 0 hours workers, 0 hours employees. So one of the things we find with many of the clients we work with, so a lot of our clients have a very real need to employ people on a casual or 0 hours basis. But what we find is the wording that they often use in their terms and conditions of employment, and there you have it right there, is that your casual workers can just through a misplaced word in the document be granted employment status, and that means that they have the full rights of an employee to things like statutory sick pay in a way that is not intended, because it doesn't apply to somebody who has a worker status as opposed to employee status. It will, in many respects, become irrelevant once this bill becomes law, because anybody on a casual or 0 hours basis will have the right to request that their hours become fixed and permanent, and so it is inevitable, we feel, that once this bill becomes law, it will become much harder to employ people on a 0 hours or casual basis in the way that particularly sectors like social care have been used to taking people on and to cover your services in that sense. One of the other changes is that statutory sick pay, so the waiting time of statutory sick pay is going to be abolished. So currently, if somebody goes sick and your sick pay is statutory rather than any sort of enhanced company sick pay, then they get nothing for the first 3 days. The SSP kicks in from day 4 onwards. That will change, and employees will have a day 1 right to statutory sick pay. So the waiting time will be abolished, and so about 1.3 million workers, according to the government's estimates, will become eligible for SSP in a way that they aren't currently. 0 hours contracts we've talked about, and fire and rehire. So yeah, so the protective award in collective redundancy is going to be extended to 180 days, from where it's currently 90 days. This is all not quite pie in the sky, because the bill is there in black and white for people to read. It is currently working its way through Parliament. It's probably about 3/4 of the way through Parliament. So possibly by the time Parliament rises for the summer recess, if not soon after they return in the autumn, we will know what this bill, the bill will receive its royal assent, and we will know what it looks like. We expect these changes, once they do become law, will take effect from April 2026. So we'll probably have about 6 months to review your policies, your processes, your working practices, to make sure that they will be compliant with the new law when it comes into effect. And that's all I have to say for that. So I'll open the floor to any questions, please. As was said at the beginning, Nectar, we are very happy to offer everyone who is here today a 1 hour free consultation on an HR issue that is burning with you at the moment. All you have to do is email the address on the screen with the code that's shown there, so IHSCM Nectar, and we will happily engage with you on a completely pro bono 1 hour free consultation on any HR topic that is of concern to you.
Thank you, Andy. Has anybody got any questions for Andy? Because there's a lot there, for sure. Anybody got any questions? I've got some questions.
Yes, please.
I know. Go on. Can't see the name. Emily,
Hi.
do you want to go? Yeah,
hello. I always have a question. I guess it's just sort of like in the wider context around kind of, agency casual workers, is the move then with the likes of 0 hours, for example, they're being phased out if then they're able to request fixed hours, and then the other benefits that come with that, and then it's sort of blurring the lines between worker and employee?
Yes, I mean, I think we all know that just even the topic of 0 hours workers has been controversial over the past few years.
Yes, I think they're banned in New Zealand, aren't they?
Yes, I believe they are. But yeah, now specifically when people are talking about the negatives of 0 hours workers, they're really talking about the gig economy. They're talking about your Uber drivers, your Deliveroos, your every deliveries, all these sorts of things. So people aren't really talking about social care or thinking about social care when they think about the negatives of 0 hours workers and the insecurity that provides. Now, I know, because obviously I talk to people like yourself on a daily basis, that if you can't, particularly if you, for example, provide domiciliary care, your demands fluctuate on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and so you need to have people that you can call up who can step in and go and provide a service, but you can't afford to be paying them when they don't have a client to visit or a service to provide. And to try to do that would completely, drive up your costs and everything else. So, we will see as this goes through. My feeling is that this is really targeted at the gig economy,
Okay.
but it's going to have an effect on sectors like social care. People have various ideological reasons for being opposed to the concept of 0 hours contracts. They're not even a new thing.
No.
My first ever job was on what today we would call a 0 hours contract. That was doing match day merchandising at my local football ground. So when a home match was coming up, I was one of a number of people who get a phone call to see if I was free on that Saturday afternoon, and if I was, great, and if I wasn't, I was 15 years old. Worked a treat for me. It was pin money.
That's
when
the
I
thing.
needed
They
it.
have their place.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's just
Exactly. So it's one that once we know exactly what the law that's passed looks like, we're going to have to look really, really seriously about how that's going to affect yourselves, particularly the social care sector, because if all your casual workers, all your bank workers, all your your various other irregular type workers suddenly come to you and say, well, I have consistently worked 3 days a week between this time and this time at this place for the past however many months. I now want to make this fixed and regular. The law as it's currently written, the bill as it's currently written, means that you're going to have to agree to that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if there's been sort of considerable hours worked over sort of very regular intervals, you could argue, why are they not an employee?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you. Did we get a copy of the slides? I was trying to sort of make notes, but
yes, and I'll send out the copy of the slides.
Oh, brilliant.
I'll do a recording and then I'll send out the copy of the slides. I might send out the copy of the slides before, just
Great.
so you know, because sometimes what happens is if you want to put your emails in the chat, and then I've definitely got them, because when I export them from Teams, I can't, it doesn't give me the email addresses sometimes. I should have them on the booking system, but sometimes I can't access it. So it would help if you've got the email addresses there. Thank you, Emily. I did have another question, and it was from Jacqueline. And Jacqueline's asking, with regards to the 1 hour free, would that include something like, just having that 2p conversation with you?
Yeah, I mean, there would be a limit on how much there would be a limit on how much we could cover on a topic like 2p within an hour. But yes, we would happily have the conversation.
Okay, lovely. I just had a question as well, because what it seems, obviously, my remit is social care, and the majority of people that I speak to and I know that operate are small businesses. And for me, this just, obviously with everything that's gone on with the national minimum wage increase and, the national insurance, etc., there's a whole lot going on. So what are you saying that if somebody, and I'm going back to the maternity, so if you've got 2 people who within your team, perhaps team leaders or a deputy manager or a care manager, you've got 2 people within your team that are pregnant, and
yes.
But you actually need to really cut your costs because basically the business is going under. Are you saying you can't make them redundant? Is that what the law is saying? I know that's not what you're saying, but is that what the law is saying?
In a nutshell, yes. Now, there are some sort of ways around it, because frankly, if the only alternative is that there would be no business at all when they come back off the maternity leave, then actually there has to be a very real serious, frank conversation with people. But if you, for example, had 2 team leaders and you were looking to reduce them to 1, and one of those team leaders is pregnant, then they are excluded from the redundancy consultations, because they are protected. So suddenly your redundancy pool, instead of being the 2 that you would expect it to be, is 1.
And basically it means, it's just, it's just a minefield, and it just seems to not support. I completely understand that people need to have good rights, employee rights. That's absolutely, it's important. However, that there just seems to be, I'm sure if there's any small businesses on the call here at the moment, there doesn't seem to be like a lot of good news for small businesses. It all seems very negative and not in support of them. So I'm just making that. There was another point in terms of your fixed hours, and I know that you and Emily just discussed this, but with regards to, so you're saying that basically 0 hours contracts will go. So if you've got people, we tend to call them the bank staff that are there, that tend, because they actually like it, there's a lot of people that actually their employment's very much, like you were saying, fits in with their lifestyle. But if that's the case, they would have to have a contract. If they're not going to abide by 0 hours contracts, then it has to work for the employer. So they will then have to say, right, okay, well, you need to work these hours. If we've got this contract, we need to make sure that you're available this, and this day. Is that how that would work?
So, you know, there are still some unknowns about this, but you know, if I can sort of draw on some personal experience. So in my time in the hospice, we had a number of bank healthcare assistants. These were invariably people who had past normal retirement age, but, you know, liked to stay involved and so on. So former regular full-time healthcare assistants or nurses or you know, other health professionals who you know, happily gave up, you know, 1 or 2 days a week to, you know, to do that healthcare assistant role within the hospice, because you know for all sorts of, you know, good reasons. Typically, they worked regular hours. So, you know, without mentioning any names, you know, sort of HCA one knew that she was always working on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. And she built her life, her weekly routine around the fact that on a Tuesday and a Wednesday she was going to be working in the hospice. So in that sense, they weren't bank workers at all. You know, they were you know, full-time. Oh, sorry, they were permanent part-time workers. But in that case, in that instance, they liked the arrangement as it was, because it gave them freedom to, you know,
to say no,
to say no, and to go on holiday when they chose to, and not have to you know, worry about the shift, the rota, because that wasn't their responsibility. So, you know, if we'd played it right by the book, we should have taken them onto the payroll as part-time permanent employees. But they didn't want that, you know, because the arrangement worked for them. So, you know, looking forward, it will still be incumbent on the worker to request to be put onto a permanent contract.
Right. Okay.
So if the worker is happy with the current arrangement, then
that's okay.
Everyone's happy.
Okay.
The problem will come is if all or most or a majority of your workers decide that they want to go onto the permanent payroll, then some difficult conversations are going to have to be had.
Okay, super. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that, Andy. I've got a question from Alison, and she's put, in relation to the worker protection statutory duty to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment,
Yes.
Would you advise on a standalone policy on this, or is it sufficient to have a policy that includes reference guidance on this, e.g. a bullying and harassment policy?
So we would recommend, because this is so new, I say new, it's about 6 months old now, we recommend a standalone policy, because, you know, when the CQC come knocking, or if you end up in a tribunal situation, you know, what will be looked for is, what is your policy? And if you have a standalone policy on sexual harassment specifically, then, you know, that makes it a lot easier to point at. I think in time it will be absorbed into the broader bullying and harassment policy. But for now, we are recommending, when we are, you know, providing policies for our clients, we put a paragraph in the bullying and harassment policy to say that there is a separate policy on sexual harassment, and then we have a bespoke sexual harassment policy, which then has attached to it the sexual harassment risk assessment and the action log.
Super. I hope that's answered your question, Alison. Got somebody else typing in the chat. Anybody else got any questions? I know Julie's just typing in the chat, so might be a question. Anybody got any other questions? Got another 10 minutes yet, so very happy. Okay, so Julie has asked, for staff on a bank-only contract in the NHS, is there any requirement to offer them a minimum number of hours?
Right. Now, this is it's a phenomenally interesting question because it's a really, really complicated answer. It depends on the nature of the employer relationship. If somebody is correctly classed as a 0 hours worker, then you don't have to offer them work, and they don't have to accept work. So that's, so when people talk about 0 hours, that is generally what they think they mean. You can still have people on a 0 hours employment contract that then gives them an employee status rather than a worker status, which apart from anything else creates entitlements to things like statutory sick pay that workers don't have. But if that's the case, then you must offer work and they must accept work that's offered. So probably the biggest single piece of work that we, when you put everything together, thing that probably takes up more of our time currently than anything else is navigating the complexities of that employee or worker relationship, because it's so easy to create a 0 hours terms and conditions document that inadvertently creates an employee relationship. And therefore,
I'm going to let Julie come in there because
yes.
I think you wanted to. Yeah, I think you want to say something there. Then, Julie.
Yeah, no, only because rather than typing back and forth, I'll be brave and engage. Because obviously, I work in a fairly large trust, and obviously, in terms of financial management for this year, one of the commitments that we're looking to do is essentially decrease our reliance on bank and agency payment for this year, and there has been some quite clear guidance, shall we just say, on what that might look like, which means that some staff who are on who choose to be on a bank only contract will get offered less work. And if in the trust ideal world, we wouldn't be using bank at all, let's say, for example, or very, very minimal. And that was what prompted my question is are we going to come a bit of a stickler? And I don't know in the NHS if we use 0 hours employment or if our HR have advised something different, but there are a clear cohort of both nurses and healthcare who've chosen to work only a bank only, who do a reasonable amount of regular hours, and who now this year might be very, very different for them. And I didn't know what that was the prompt for the question. And I didn't know if we might get ourselves into a bit of mischief if they said that we've done a material change or decrease in hours, but probably a tricky one, like you say.
It is a tricky one, and yes, potentially you could find yourself in some mischief by inadvertently creating an employee relationship, or by unilaterally changing terms and conditions that is deemed to cause detriment to the your bank staff.
What classes as an employee relationship in that for a bank only contract? What would constitute, though you've tipped over into an employer? What would that look like?
The main difference in this context is that for a 0 hours worker, you do not have to offer work, and they do not have to accept it. Okay. What I find in a number of organisations that use staff in this way is that employers often don't understand the reciprocal part of that. So there is a tendency that I need you to work a night shift next Tuesday. And then the member staff comes back and says, well, sorry, I'm not available next Tuesday. I don't want to accept that, which of course then creates a hole in your rota that you need to fill. And the person you've gone to fill it has said no thanks. So what then tends to happen is you end up with this imbalance where the employer thinks that oh, there we go. So somebody's very helpfully put the link in the chat.
Thank you, whoever that is. Thank you.
So the employer wants to know that they're able, that they have the ability, the resource to provide services, and and so says, well, I only want to employ you when I have need of you, but when I have need of you, I expect you to show up.
Yeah, no, we don't have that arrangement, certainly in the
Yeah.
NHS. This it sounds like it's more aligned to the 0 hours, i.e. we're not under obligation to offer any of our bank staff hours, and similarly we just put it out on a system and it's up to them who chooses. If it's unfilled, it's unfilled. So we probably, I don't know if it's worded like that, but it sounds like we have a 0 hours arrangement. So
it sounds like in
that's,
practice
yeah,
that's working
that's
exactly
fine.
as
Thank
it's
you very much for
supposed to.
clarifying. Thank you.
Super. Anybody got any questions, final questions for Andy? Well,
Amazing.
I think certainly from what I've gleaned from this is make sure you've got a good HR advisor. And recommend Nectar HR. I just, it is an absolute minefield, isn't it? Completely, it's so important to get good advice when you need it, because this could if you don't get it right, it can get you into all sorts of trouble, couldn't it?
Thank you, everybody.
Any final thoughts from you, Andy, before we close the session?
No, just thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining and for listening to me rabbit on for the best part of an hour. I hope you all got something good from it.
Thank you so much, Andy. Really appreciated you going through that. It's a great session, and I know people have found that really useful. So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Very useful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.